let's start. Welcome to the 141st New York Chinese Culture Salon event. My name is Zhao Zhichen. I'm the founder and organizer of the New York Culture Salon. So before we start, let me introduce a bit about our organization. So New York Culture Salon is the nonprofit organization registered at New York State. So we're trying to provide an interdisciplinary platform that people from different areas come to share their thoughts and knowledge. And so the events started 5 years ago from my living room at my apartment, and now it's been over 140 events. So you're welcome to come to our website at nyshalong.com, nyshalong.com. So we post most of our video and audio and slides on our website. And you're also welcome to register our mailing list at the website so that you can get notice of the events at the first time. So today it's our great pleasure to have Basil Twist to give this talk and interview. So as you know, Basil Twist is most famous for his show Symphonie Fantastique. Basil Twist is the third generation puppeteer originally from San Francisco. He is the founder and director of the Dream Music Puppetry program at Here Art Center in New York City, which supports and produces new puppet artists. Basil Twist creates iconic, visionary puppetry worlds with a remarkable range of style and scope, appearing in intimate nightclubs to large orchestra halls. Basil Twist is also a sought-after collaborator for theater, dance, opera, and film. 20 years ago, in 1998, Basil Twist debuted his boundary-breaking response to Berlioz's 1830 Symphonie Fantastique. In the 2 decades, now it's the 2 decades since the Symphonie Fantastique premiere, Basil Twist has become an internationally recognized artist in opera, ballet, and on Broadway, and has won countless awards, including the MacArthur Fellowship in 2015. I'm glad to host this event. This event is co-hosted by New York Culture Salon and Here Art Center. We also would like to thank Weber Consulting for coordinating the event. For those who are interested in today's show but haven't bought tickets yet, so you can get a $5 off promotion code. The code is SFNYC. So the code is valid for any show in future. So if you are interested, you can buy today's show at 4 p.m. or any show in the future. So you can just buy that in the box office. Oh, and also one more thing I have to remind you that so we are using the huge water tank, and because it takes hours to fill the tank, for today's 4 p.m. show, we are going to start filling water when we talk. So you may hear water filling the voice. Just be aware that nothing is leaking, just normal. So just be aware of that. Don't worry. So anyway, so I wish you enjoy this event, and more importantly, enjoy the show today at 4 p.m. So without further ado, let's welcome Basil Twist.
Hi everyone, I am Wei Zhou from Weber Consulting, and thank you Fred and the New York Chinese Culture Salon to organize this. And also I would like to first open the conversation with Basil to thank you for adjusting your schedule, because Basil actually had some last minute emergencies from the family, but he actually adjusted his travel schedule today just to stay here for extra 1 hour to meet with us. Really appreciate that, and I wish you and your family well. So 20 years ago, you created Symphonie Fantastique, and the New York Times appraised that as the hottest one, even like the Lion King Broadway show. So you have been highly demanded by opera, theaters, dance, and you won the MacArthur Award. Could you please tell us a little bit? That's also what I would love to know is, during the 20 years, you come a long way. Could you think about maybe 3 most important things that make you become the now you to be so successful since you were little when you start to play puppet?
You mean the 3 most important things since when this show opened?
Or since when you were little, and how make you come to this step?
Well, when I was little, my mother was a puppeteer, and so that made a big impression on me when I was really young. She doesn't still do puppetry, but it was sort of a hobby she was doing. with some friends. Anyway, but when I was like 10 years old, I got to come to New York City from San Francisco, and I got to visit the Muppet headquarters, where Kermit and Miss Piggy and Sesame Street and all those puppets. This was in 1980, so it was like the most popular TV show in the whole world. And I was a kid who was so excited about puppets, and I got to go to the place where they make all the puppets, and saw Jim Henson's office, and it's just incredible. That what made a big impression on me.
Yes. And of course from your family, because your grandparents also.
My grandfather was also interested in puppetry. He was mostly a musician. He was a big band leader in the 1930s and 40s and did big band music. And he used puppets sometimes as part of his music shows, just as a special extra thing. He died before I was born, so I never met him. But but my grandmother gave me those puppets, and those puppets are actually on display downstairs. If you already went down and used the bathroom, or if you after this, might want to go see. There's these beautiful,
it's very interesting,
beautiful antique puppets that belonged to my grandfather, and my grandmother gave them to me, which when I was 10. So that was also a very important moment for me as a puppeteer, to get this gift and to go to New York and see Jim Henson, and very influential.
Yes.
And then jumping forward, the next thing might have been, I went to a puppetry school.
In France?
In France, which was a really extraordinary and unusual opportunity.
Yes.
Most puppeteers don't go to school at all for puppetry, and this was in France, and it was like everything in France. It's just, you were so connected to the incredible cultural life of France. It was the Ministry of Culture has this arts conservatory dedicated to puppetry, and so.
And you are the only American.
I'm the only American.
At this moment, still.
Yeah.
That went to that school.
I'm the only American who's done 3 years of training. There's many other Americans who have come in and studied at the institute or participated in its activities. Even I have a puppeteer here who's you'll meet later, who's working with me, and he spent time there in it's called Charleville is the town in France. There's a huge, also the biggest puppet festival in the world takes place there 2 times every 2 years in September. So the next one is September 2019, but it's like the biggest puppet festival from all over the world, and thousands of people. It's incredible.
I heard you met one of the Chinese puppeteer. What's his name? Who also studied in the same school with you?
Let's see.
It will come to us. I know one of my staff members know about the name. I will mention about him later.
Okay.
Yes, and then I also know that at one point the director of the school, Margareta, says that you, as one of the most difficult students that she had, based on all the creative and innovative works you've tried during your study in France. So what was your method when create those works, and why she made that comment?
Well, maybe because, any school, this is an incredible school. It's like the Hogwarts or the Harvard of puppetry. It's very small, but any school, a school is a school is a school. You're always thinking, oh, my teachers are so stupid. They don't know. Why do they always talk about the same thing? Or why is this like this? Why, you start ask questions and kind of questioning things. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't in school. If you didn't have the professor who you didn't agree with, you might not form that opinion of your own, And so, like for me, the school was very, it was very artistic. So it was French, and there was some things that I missed in puppet shows. Like, I like traditional puppet show where the puppeteer is hidden. I think, like to me as a child, that was almost the definition of a puppet show. I didn't like to see a puppeteer visible. Now I sometimes see that, and I sometimes even do that.
Similar to the Chinese way too, right?
I mean, it's an old-fashioned American way of doing it too. It's like you have the puppet stage and you can't see the puppeteers. I liked that. I'm also can do it where you can see the puppeteer, and it's also interesting, and I appreciate that. But in France, it was only seeing the puppeteer being visible. Everybody did that. That was like the modern way. And I always was questioning that, for example. And then I wanted to see, a show. Like we would study also all the arts while we were in school, and we studied, and we would go to Paris and we would see theater and go to museums, and we were studying, the history of visual art and how in the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, artists like Kandinsky just started making paintings that weren't of anything. They were just composition and shape and color and not representational. And how interesting that was. And then puppetry sort of doesn't, visual arts advance a lot. It's just the next movement. Now it's surrealism, now it's expressionism, now it's post-expressionism, now it's postmodernism, now it's this kind of like pop. There's all this different kinds of visual art. And puppetry doesn't have that same developed sense. So I thought, oh, there should be an abstract puppet show, like an abstract painting that has the essence of puppetry.
And that was amazing. It was 20 years ago that you had this thought, or more than that, because it took you a few years to develop this concept.
Yeah.
And you found the perfect music to go with the concept.
Yeah.
When you were walking in New York street, right?
Yes.
You saw the water tank, a fish tank.
I saw a fish tank on my street near my studio and brought it into a little one like this big, and it was broken. The glass had one crack in it, and I brought it into my studio and taped up the crack and put some water in it and just started playing with some fabric on like a coat hanger. I took a coat hanger and a piece of fabric and just thought that it looked so nice, cool, and it looked alive. It looked not just like garbage floating, but it actually, I could make it move, and it looked like it was alive. And I thought, that's so interesting. It's puppetry, but it's the simplest. There's no eyes, there's no face, there's no story, but it's still something that is basically inanimate, and then you take it and you make it be animate.
Yes, you expand the imagination space for people to imagine according to your own experience or story, but still has a storyline by the original Symphonie Fantastique story. Yes. I do have a question, because everybody, when we were little, we have a passion, but when in the past of when we grow up, sometimes that will not let us to further our interest. And I read a story about you, maybe at your teenage period, that you thought from the peer pressure that you kind of try to hide your interest a little bit. So what make you bring it up again or pursue this childhood interest?
I think you just as sometimes people think puppets are only for children, obviously, and they're really great for children, and children love them. But I was afraid in high school that people would think, oh, you like a thing for children, you're not cool, because high school you want to be cool. So I was actually kind of hid my passion, and then I finished high school, and then I went to college, and I started going to Oberlin College, which is in Ohio. and it's in the middle of nowhere. And it was driving me crazy to be in this school. And what are you supposed to study? History or philosophy or math? No, or what did you study? I wasn't interested. I was so frustrated.
Your passion is still knocking at the door.
Yeah.
Right?
And I went one day to a building that had this sort of alternative studies department, different, books about doing classes in other countries or studying, on a boat or different things, right? Like, let's try something else. And I opened this one book in internships in the arts. Oh, okay, let's just see that. And I opened it up. I opened it it fell open to, the Center for Puppetry Arts, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. The biggest kind of institution around puppetry in the United States is in Atlanta, the Center for Puppetry Arts. And I didn't know about that. But I saw that and I said, that's what I do. What am I doing here? I have to go there. And I quickly changed my plan. And I came to New York first, actually, and just started working and calling people up and visiting people and helping puppeteers for free, and and then starting to make things for people for tiny money, or while I was getting ready to go to Atlanta. And that's how it was, that moment, that book, and seeing it, that it was like remembering everything, remembering my childhood passion, remembering all the things that I had made that were really good, how skilled I was at figuring stuff out. And it had only been, I don't know, maybe 3 years or something, because high school is, maybe when you were 16, 16 is when you think, I want to be so cool. So you put it away. But probably by the time I was 19, I was like, I know I want to do puppetry. That's what I want to do.
I know that our audience, you probably have been to some Broadway shows, and maybe you can educate us, since you've been heavily involved in Broadway and off-Broadway productions. In your mind, what's the difference between a Broadway, off-Broadway production, and what's a challenge for an off-Broadway production?
Oh my goodness, they're so different. So this here is very off-Broadway. This is probably off-Broadway. Or off. It's smaller. I mean, technically.
I feel so cool. It's between Soho and Chinatown.
Yeah.
This is the best location.
No, it's a great location,
Yes.
and it's very interesting too. It's changed a lot in 20 years, because 20 years when I did this show at the same location, it really was, this area was about the Holland Tunnel. It was like where you go to the Holland Tunnel. There was a gas station, there were some parking lots. It was all about that. It was like not a great area to be. And now it's nice restaurants. And
Yes.
this park that they're opening and stuff. So
Broadway, off-Broadway.
Broadway, off-Broadway.
Yes.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So this is off-Broadway. And it's mostly because it's so small. The number of seats in a Broadway house is more than 500
But it's
seats.
perfect for this kind of intimate show.
Oh, you have to. I could not make this show bigger. You could use video screens and stuff, but I don't like that idea. I like the real thing. A lot of people think sometimes they think this show is a video, because behind the curtain is a giant aquarium, and sometimes people just they think it's a video. So
20 years ago, it was only a 500-gallon.
It was a
water
little bit
tank.
smaller, yeah. So the
and
window
now
was
it's 1,000-gallon.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what you saw, now the window's this big, and back then it was like this. But it was a very crazy hot ticket back then.
Yeah.
My press agent back at that time is now the press agent of Hamilton.
Ooh.
And he says, he's like, Symphonie Fantastique was the Hamilton
Yes.
of downtown.
I agree.
It was so you couldn't get in. Like it was so packed.
Advanced. Because even like after 20 years, when you reproduce this show, the New York Times, I love their quotes. They said it's hear the color, see the music, because you can like listen to the music through your eyes. I think it's a perfect quotes about this show, and you wouldn't believe he hired 5 guys behind the scene, right?
Yeah.
And Andy is one of them.
Yeah. Hi, Andy.
And he went to the same school as Basil. Yes.
He spent time in Charleville, in the city in France, with the.
I did a creative residency there. I didn't study formally like Basil did, but I was invited to go do a residency to create a new show there.
But almost all of the puppeteers I work with also. Puppeteers are like this. They all make their own shows. They all make and perform and are super talented. And I'm so lucky that I, have these people come close to me and work with me.
And you are hiring 5 big guys, adults, and then this grade.
Well, 2 smaller women.
How do you make it happen? Because I heard that there is an exact choreographer for each show.
Yeah.
So every time the movement will be the same. You come to see it today, tomorrow it might be a little bit different. It's dancing in the water. It's like a ballet dancing in the water.
The things that change is the water, because you put something underwater and it maybe moves a little bit differently today than yesterday. But what you do backstage is the same. So everything backstage is like super tightly choreographed
and precisely
precise.
Enter from a same angle every time.
Yeah, and it's very it's very physical, especially because when we made the tank, the tank used to be like big enough so that you and I could I could give you a puppet and you could take it.
Got it.
And now the tank is so big that I can't do that. So we have all this systems. He'll show you that you have to hang over the tank and you're jumping. It's like a jungle gym that you climb around on, and it's wet and it's fast. And
Basil has arranged the opportunity for everybody to go backstage and see the arrangement after the talk.
Which I think will be really interesting, especially if any of you come at the 4 o'clock show, because we typically let people take a peek backstage after the show, which people really enjoy. But I'm really curious to see what it's like if you take a peek before to see, because some people come and they think, is it a video screen? You have no idea, which is part of the, that's part of the dangers of doing the puppets, having all the puppeteers hidden and having that kind of, in a way, old-fashioned.
And they have to be in the diving suits. I saw it.
Yes, because we get so wet.
They get all wet. So
but they don't get in the water. They just splash a lot. So at the end of the show, it's just totally wet back there.
So what made you change the components of the? When I say components of the music, is that 20 years ago they used the recording to play the orchestra version of the Symphonie Fantastique, but this time, when you put it on again, it's different. Now you have a Steinway piano, and you have a fabulous piano player, Chris O'Reilly, who plays this version that's being rewritten or transcribed from the orchestra version into a piano version by Liszt.
Yes, Franz. It's a special arrangement of the giant. It's a famous symphony piece. It's a huge orchestra that plays it. And there's this special arrangement for piano that Franz Liszt made, which is part of why the piece is well known. Because back when that piece was made, of course, there weren't recordings and records, and Liszt helped share the piece by a piano. But Christopher O'Reilly, who plays he is so incredible. This guy who plays the piano, it's its own show of its own. Like, you don't need the water tank, actually. Like, he's enough. It's like he's so amazing. And how I met him was, we did the show 20 years ago, and then we did it in California, where I'm from, in San Francisco, and then we did it in Montreal.
The show went on touring with the big water tank.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I did it in lots of places, always using the recording. Once in Chicago, though, I went to a festival. It's called the Ravinia Music Festival. It's a place where they do music, and they wanted to present me, but they said, but we don't want to use recorded music, because that's not what we do here. Why don't you do it with our friend Christopher O'Reilly? And I said, sure, I don't care. Same difference to me. That sounds great. And he came and did that. And that was years ago that happened. And it's very rare that actually other times I've been able to do it with him. I kept doing it with a recording in other places. But when I knew I was going to bring it back here, I said, I want to do it more. I wanted the people who saw it 20 years ago, I want you to have the even more experience. The tank is a little bit bigger. We have this piano now. So I want to have it be on the piano. And I didn't think that Chris would actually come for it's quite a long run.
Because Chris is also a very well-known radio anchor.
Yeah.
He has his own show called On the Top. He also
From the Top
on
NPR.
And he brings talented young musicians to give them a stage to showcase their talents. Chris also works or play with those young talented musicians that he brings in.
And he also does concerts all over the world, and he
works with other
artist.
orchestras quite often too. He's a very well-known figure.
So when I met him at Ravinia, I thought, oh, it's so special. I would probably, and he lives in Los Angeles, and so I thought I would never be able to get him here. But I let him know that I was doing this, and maybe he had some advice, and he said, don't let anybody else do it. This is my gig, basically. This is I don't want anybody else to play this. And he really doesn't. And he moved to New York for 6 months to do this show, which is great.
Yeah, and also, little secret thing is that I had a chance to talk to Chris at one time after the show. He told me that even the score, the music score from Liszt, some parts were missing. He actually has to put in a few by himself using his own experience. And last time when I saw the show, I thought that was amazing because I was sitting there, I feel like I was seeing two shows. One is the piano solo play, the other is the puppet show. Yeah. So I think you're so humble by saying it is the piano center, but I think when you combine the two shows together, that's truly the New York Times quotes about here the color, see the music. And you definitely get your buck's worth twice the show. Yeah. Two shows. You're like watching the two shows at the same time. And it's a perfect combination.
But part of the thing, too, is actually, even though the show is abstract, so it's like an abstract painting. It's just colors. There's not a story that you need to follow. There's not even any faces. Maybe you see them, you imagine them, but I didn't make, it's just this colorful, strange world. There is a little bit of a story behind the music, and the story is Hector Berlioz, who wrote the symphony. He actually wrote a little story to go with the music, and the story is basically that there's an artist who's obsessed with an unattainable woman, and he's obsessed, and he has these dreams and nightmares too. And so it becomes that Chris is the artist. He's the artist who's having this vision, and it works very, I think it becomes very theatrical to have him present, and gives it a human touch.
And then also, I got a chance to talk to Chris one time, that they had a new cast member behind, so they actually have to go through an 8-hour rehearsal. And just to think about, Chris cannot see the cast member behind the scene, and the cast member cannot also, the puppeteer cannot see him. But they have to rehearsal many times to make sure that all the movement from the puppeteer matches the pianos, the rhythm, the everything. And also when you see the lighting, I have to say it's amazing too. I don't know how you did it, but it's truly For me, it's a museum piece. It's like a contemporary artworks.
Thank you. My lighting designer, his name is Andrew Hill. He was my main collaborator. He was here. He's working at Lincoln Center right now, but he was here last night to see the show. The lighting is really important.
And I know that usually here, we all know that off-Broadway shows, sometimes if it's not being welcomed by the audience, they stop after 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
And since you said this is off-Broadway, but the amazing thing is that this show, after 20 years put on, it's got extended twice already. So which already tells you how much demand the local audience or the travel, all the tourists from other states who heard 20 years ago, they died to come and grab a ticket.
Well, it's good for also the summertime too now, because it actually, and also for tourists, and because it's not a play, there's no language.
Yes.
It's not like you need to be able to follow the story if you don't speak English as well. So it's great for tourists and stuff. But it's amazing. We started it in the end of March, and it was still snowing outside while we were working on this show. And now it's so hot. It's nice actually to be in the water and play with the water. Actually, it's really fun. Of course, it's like going to the swimming pool.
I'm going to switch the topic because you worked with theaters, with opera, with film. By the way, audience, you're more than welcome to also ask questions because Basil do have to leave around 1:30ish.
Yeah,
so you worked with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of the Azkaban.
Yes.
So could you tell a little bit, maybe some stories related to that, or compare to theater work? What's the difference? What's the challenge?
Oh gosh, well, the Harry Potter, it was a movie, not the current play that's happening right now, and it was one of the movies. The third movie, which the director of it, he saw Symphonie Fantastique actually, and so he was so excited, and he asked me to be a part of the movie. And what I worked on was the Dementors, which are the sort of scary black ghost creatures that like suck your soul.
Okay.
And we did them underwater to just get that feeling of the floatiness of fabric and stuff. So, and then they eventually, use computers and things to make it do more. But it was that's what I did. But it was very different than working in the theater. Totally different, and I didn't like it as much, I have to say. I mean, it was a Harry Potter movie. It was very high pressure, too. So it was like tons and tons of people in a big tank of water, and it was in London, and it was cool. But it's amazing what the resources that they have for a movie. When you're trying to do stuff in theater and you really don't have the same resources. It's like you have to find a tank on the street that's garbage, or you have to ask your friends to please help, and it's very different.
Yes, it's truly, for film, it's like a truly commercial production, or they have money, I know, to support lots of productions.
But you don't have the satisfaction of being with people and having that.
Yes.
It's not that you don't have the same.
I heard lots of
connection with an audience.
Yeah, I heard lots of producers say that, especially also the cast members. And by the way, Basil was in the show 20 years ago. Was one of the puppeteer. So I always heard that the cast members or actors, they really love to be in the same room with the audience. You feel the audience feedback. That's how you feel you're getting rewarded.
Yeah. Although with this show, it's funny because we're not in the same room. It's like we're in another room. When we do this, right now everything is open. You're kind of coming before the show, so everything is open, but we sort of close it down with curtains. And we close these doors back there so that you can't hear, because they make a lot of noise. So we want you to just hear the piano and not hear the noise. So when we shut the doors, it's like they're in a room. They're like in another room. And it's part of why I think we like to meet the audience afterwards, because we don't get that the same connection of being an actor on stage, or like I'm having now with you, because behind the wall, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So you think, has the audience changed from since 20 years ago and right now? Do we have more demand of the show?
I don't know. I was nervous to do the show again, to a degree, because you want it to all go really well in New York City.
Yes.
And to bring something back, you don't want people to say, "Oh, it was better before," or "Times have changed," and that's what that's what our parents liked. It's like we don't want it to be like that.
Yeah.
We want it to still feel fresh, and so you're a little nervous.
I
when it
know
happens.
the competition is extremely high in New York City. You have more than 100 choices in between concerts,
every day, right.
Theatricals, everything,
Yeah.
outdoor, indoor. Yes.
And sometimes you go and see something and people are like, okay. And I always want people to come and go, wow, wow. So I was nervous about it, but a lot of people come backstage and say, wow, after the show. And so it's amazing. It's totally amazing, this 20-year experience of doing it 20 years ago and doing it now and this theater has changed, the neighborhood has changed, I've changed, the world has changed, but this is the same show in the same address, basically, the same location, and to revisit it is so, like, when people come, every night people come and they say, oh, I saw this 20 years ago. And it blows my mind that people are like, I saw this 20 years ago and I wanted to see it again. And it's been 20 years and I've had children, or I have become a scientist, or I'm an artist, or whatever. 20 years is a long time. So it's amazing that people come and they still enjoy the show. It makes me think that you could do it also 100 years ago, and then it would be the same thing, or even 100 years in the future. That there's something about the show that's very elemental, and it's this and this without this piece of music. I mean, this piece of music. I think we forget how much this piece of music is an incredible creation by an artist named Hector Berlioz,
yes,
who composed this piece of music from his crazy passion, and that's you can hear the
and it has
color in it.
4 chapters, right?
It has 5 chapters.
5 chapters.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you will actually see how the story started, and then how they develop this. I don't know, attractions or between the man and woman, but then and also last you have a peak of the show. I also heard that you once created a puppetry show called Dakugashi.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's showing the traditional puppet techniques from Japan.
Yes. Dogugayashi.
Dakugashi.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there is some difference between maybe puppetry in US, in Europe, or in Asia, and how do they inspire you?
I am totally, as a puppeteer, many puppeteers are inspired by other cultures and other puppetry traditions, because every culture and tradition has some sort of form of puppetry. It's like it's actually an essential human expression, like music or dance in some weird way. There's always a doll or effigy or some way that we bring something to life everywhere. And in Asia, particularly in China, obviously, in Japan, there's a very noble tradition of puppetry that's connected to literature, and it's a high art. The bunraku is hundreds of years old, and this great high extreme tradition, very beautiful. In Indonesia, a puppeteer is, in Indonesia is where they have this connection to puppetry that I think is true actually throughout Asia, which is a more connection to that sort of, it's a sacred root it's like a puppeteer in Indonesia is a priest. They're dealing with spirit and the difference between life and death, and it's a very and objects that have souls in them. It's much more. It has a spiritual content than in the United States or even Europe, where it's more fun. And it's still, there's great fun puppetry in Asia, but there's a little more of that, what is the memory of what it's about. And anyway, I like that.
Have you been to China? I guess probably we would love to know that.
I have been to China a couple times. I've been to Beijing, and I was in far part of China also, Sichuan Banao, where I was working on a sort of Cirque du Soleil kind of show. But I think the show didn't work out.
Is that because Chinese are very attached to their traditional
I don't
form?
know. I don't know why. I think it was a very, it was like in China where there was a whole, it's I think a very, very pristine area. That's a nice area for nature lovers. And I think there was like, trying to develop a big area there that's like a commercial and tourism center with hotels and all this stuff, and a big kind of Cirque du Soleil style show. And so it was a giant development. So I got there when there weren't any people there yet. It was still a big construction project.
You need to develop audience.
So I think that it was a more complicated venture than just putting on a show, but the show was really complicated, and it also had water in it too. It was one of those giant shows where they like, they fill the whole stage with water and people swim in it.
I'm wondering if audience, do you have any questions? Sure.
Yeah.
Just have a question. So I noticed that you have several productions about like visualized symphonies, like the Symphonie Fantastique.
Yeah.
And also the Rite of Spring.
Rite of Spring.
Yeah, and Petrushka, those kind of things. So actually they're pretty different, right? The Symphonie Fantastique has a very clear E-day fix.
Yeah.
And for the Rite of Spring, it's just totally chaos. So what's the criteria you chose the music you want to play? And if you want to make another one, so make sure, do you have any like idea?
Well, yeah. Symphonie Fantastique started my career with classical music because I chose this piece with a recording, but then I got to do something at Lincoln Center, and I chose Petrushka. And the reason why I chose Petrushka was because it's about puppets. This is a story about puppets. It's a ballet about puppets. So it's just kind of, you choose things that they have to interest you, or you have to have some attachment to them. And the Rite of Spring, what's the Rite of Spring? I mean, how can you, it's like, I don't know if it's too scary. The Rite of Spring is such a major piece, but when you think, I can do it. And actually, Rite of Spring is very related to Symphonie Fantastique because people always wanted to see the ideas of Symphonie Fantastique made with a real orchestra. But this is as big as this gets. So I thought, I'll just do another piece. And Rite of Spring was, instead of with water, it's all silk and air. Oh, I have my silk. Should I show you my silk right now?
Yeah, let's do that.
So Rite of Spring is all, it's huge, and it's the Rite of Spring. And I don't know, you just can't not do that piece if you're able. I wish I could do that piece again. I don't know if you saw it or if anybody saw it.
No, actually, it was in Lincoln Center, right?
Yeah, it was a big show with, an orchestra in the pit. It's like going to the opera or ballet or Broadway, a huge theater with a giant orchestra but no water. So the water is really difficult to work with, and so instead what I would do in the Rite of Spring, and in other shows I've done it a lot actually. I'm going to just give a demonstration. So, piece of silk, and we would say that it's inanimate. It doesn't have a, it's not a, this is not alive. I'm alive, you're alive, you're alive. This is not alive, that's not alive, that's not alive. But I can take it, and this is the idea with the water, but I'll do this in Rite of Spring and other shows. I'll try and make it come alive. This is very strong. Now it's not alive again. It's a very simple idea, but it starts to, you see it dance, you see it come alive a little bit. You see, maybe you see a fish or clouds or something, but there's something very different when it moves. And even though you see me doing it, I'm sure sometimes it doesn't look so good, but every once in a while probably it goes, oh, it's, and that feeling where you go, oh, that's the thing that I like the best of puppetry. And it should be in any, if there's a story and a person or whatever, you should still have that feeling. That's the most important thing.
I know that there was a hand before. Do you have a question there?
Actually, I just want to know, how was the Rite of Spring received?
It was, I mean, people tell me that they loved it. I got not a good review in the New York Times for that show. So because it was reviewed as dance, for one thing. It was very difficult to find what category does the show fit into.
Mm-hmm.
So
because they send writers for different categories.
yeah, so
Yes.
you know, the reviews, a lot of reviews for the service, theater, but it's not really theater in some ways because it's music and movement. So it could be dance, but it's not dance. And of course, the Rite of Spring is a famous ballet. So the New York Times, which is the most important reviewer, didn't give it a great review, which was frustrating. I think that I would be doing that show still, actually, or doing it other places. But people loved the show who saw it. I mean, did you see it? Oh my God, it's an incredible show. It's so, it's. I used all silk and smoke and. You do see the puppeteers though. You see them on stage. There's a clip on my website. I have a website that's basiltwist.com, and there's videos of all of my shows. I would love to do the Rite of Spring again, but it's a big thing when you don't, like the New York Times giving you a good review, which I have been so lucky with the reviews for this show. It makes a big difference. So.
Yes, please.
I haven't seen the show, but I see the trailer. It's like a two-piece of clothing, like they're interacting with each other. Is that one represent the guy, one represent the lady? I don't know. I'm just.
No, there's no thing representing like there is a representation of the beloved, the figure that his obsession. So the artist's obsession. The artist, he's obsessed with a woman. And we actually call, Berlioz was really obsessed with a particular woman, and he kind of wrote this piece to woo her. Her name was Harriet. So we call everything in the show that is this special object, Harriet, and it's a white fabric. So if it's anything that's a white fabric, it's more that he is relating to it, the pianist. And sometimes there are things that are relating to each other in the show, but it's never that, it's really not that literal. It's more just like, this music sounds like oh, so there's three things there. There's three things because the music does that. And this is going, okay, that sounds red, and it's going up and down. So the show is just like a whole bunch of things like that. Like going to a museum gallery and seeing things on the wall, except for they're moving and all connected together.
I know that I need to watch your time because you do have to leave right now. Actually, it's 1:33.
Oh, okay. Well, then I can stay for 2 more minutes.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I have a question because I'm now working for a documentary about the Broadway history.
Sorry?
Broadway history.
Yes.
And by that, I learned that for the very popular show The Lion King, Julie Taymor was actually bringing in the Indonesian puppetry to make that very African flavor kind of stage alive. So I'm wondering first, do you know Julie Taymor in person, in the puppetry world?
I do, yes.
You do know her?
Yeah.
Were you collaborating a lot?
When I first came to New York, when I was calling people and I was young, I met Julie the first week I was here by accident at the Library of Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. And then I worked with her on a show called the Juan Darien, which was kind of like The Lion King. It was about a boy who turns into a jaguar. And she's seen Symphonie Fantastique.
And also for other Broadway shows that you work for,
were
you also just working for bringing the puppetry part, incorporating them into the design of the show, or you work for other parts of the stage design as well?
On Broadway, I'm mostly just doing the puppetry part. I have other shows of my own, or sometimes I have in ballet or opera. I'll do the sets and even the costumes and direct. But on Broadway, I just do the puppets. So the things that I did on Broadway was the Addams Family. I did all the kind of strange things in the Addams Family. And then recently, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I did the Oompa Loompas and kind of all the things that were tricks that kind of take puppetry. So it's very different on Broadway. It's a very different world. It's amazing to work on that level, and the performers are incredible. It's just so different than kind of this intimacy and family downtown. And the rules are different. There's a lot of rules on Broadway, and puppetry doesn't like rules.
So what I want to say is catch up this moment. If you haven't purchased your ticket, go and buy it. I know today at 4 p.m. we only have maybe a dozen tickets left, but the show will end, absolutely will end on September the 2nd. And we don't want to wait for another 5, 10 or 20 years to see it again. So capture this moment and make your purchase and then see Basil's work. And we're looking forward to see your either the stage design or creation or a part of the show in other Broadway or other film, productions.
Thank you.
And the best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And